I am NetMoverSitan. Welcome to the lore of Chapter 3.5, Hell's Chicken. They were in one of the more urbanized parts of the nest of District 11. The damned dozen, I mean. Specifically downtown. Then Faust ordered the others off the bus, as they were supposed to meet the client for their next mission there. Much to Heathcliff's annoyance. As that means they're taking requests like they're Frodo errand boys. Get over it, Bruce Banner. Gregor then pointed out something with a long line in front of it. Roger recognized it as the stirring scent of deep-fried chicken brought to a crisp in expensive oil. Then someone told her that she's not seen much of the nest of District 11, as she was unaware of Botistava chicken. Yeah, sorry if I've butchered the pronunciation. I still struggle with English. It's the hottest trend around these parts. Bodhisattva is basically a person who is on the path to enlightenment, to reach nirvana, to break the cycle of samsara, but delays this due to compassion for the suffering of other beings. Yeah, compassion is in short supply in the city. It's rare to find someone there that isn't a selfish hole. The fastidious man joined the conversation as if he was always there. Hong Lu wanted to know what Bodhisattva chicken was. Then the man gave the sales pitch. I'll try to give you an impression of this. Bodhisattva Chicken is a highly renowned restaurant known for its six-legged, eight-winged poultry, whose blissful taste and gracious quantities really make you feel great compassion. What's more, they're prepared for every preference, the buzzworthy biddy with the right amount of tenderness, the chubby capon with plentiful flesh to dig into, the chewy cockerel that's perfectly al dente, and more. I think we can guess who this bloke is. The only kind of person around there who would use sales speak. Let's move on with this. Then he asked what they wanted. And Yi Sang was... well, he's heard of this. And Roger was surprised that he was keeping up with fads. Then Heathcliff asked who he was supposed to be. He didn't think that he knew who they were, as he joined the conversation in the middle of it. Ishmael asked him to explain who they were. This man then pointed out something roaming around a restaurant. They didn't look normal to him. Dante noticed the strange-looking people that acted around the building as strange. They were K-Corp staff. Mirson noted that their heads were covered with strange masks. Sinclair thought it was some kind of mascot, thinking that it might be cute. Close up. Ishmael blew this theory apart by pointing out that the mascots were making people run away screaming. Gregor advised leaving them be. They're not moving in their direction and he doesn't want to get involved in something bothersome. That man agreed and pointed out that they weren't moving towards them. And then Gregor then noted that this man was picking up a rock from the roadside, and then we saw one of the affected individuals, a K-Corp security operative with a raw chicken for a head, get hit by that rock that this man threw at it. Dante was questioning this man's sanity, as this attracted their attention. This man called it a clumsy mistake, asking what they'd do. He did it on purpose. Roger understood that much from what literally means goat in Russian, but it can also mean hole or mother, as he aimed for the head. Honglu complimented his form. It was impressively stable to him. Honglu, are you dense? Trouble has been attracted, and this time, it's not Don Quixote's fault. Apparently this man once aspired to be a big city baseball player. Now this is interesting. They play professional baseball there. I mean, what teams would they have? The District 14 Templars? The District 9 Cavaliers? The District 25 Cossacks? Okay, going off topic with something that's actually rational in this grimdark world. Which is more than I can say about that man's action. It gave Ryushu a desire to play ball by knocking his head out of the park. Then he pointed out that they should prioritize the actual threats over him. Faust noting that they have chicken heads, and Rodia confirming this. Ishmael seeing that they're raw ones. Gregor seeing them as the ghosts of dead chickens clucking back from hell from revenge, worrying that it's because Sinclair left a chicken wing uneaten that has caused this. Well, thank you for the return to form after the rational moments. But this turned out to be teasing that Sinclair didn't rise to, noting that Roger licked it clean. That man making it clear that they're going to have to fight their way out of this. Yes, specifically, the damned dozen will need to. While he takes cover behind Dante, then the chicken-headed crowd was within striking distance. After the battle against the head chickens, taking over bodies. Wait, hang on? Head chickens? Project Moon, did you just rip off the head crabs from the Half-Life series? I'm amazed that you don't have Gabe Mule on your backs. Anyway, Gregor wanted the friendly four-eyed stranger to get back to the point. This man objects to being called that, especially from someone more fitting of that. Gregor apologized. Misalt then noted that basic personal information such as the man's identity can be easily acquired from death registration, and implied death threats. This man's, he's neglected to introduce himself, so he handed them his business card and introduced himself as Sanjo, being quick to do so due to the growing hostility towards him, largely due to him attracting trouble. According to the business card read by Heathcliff, he's a K-Corp affiliate, specifically of the Department of Food Resource Development's Research Center. He wasn't buying all the fancy words. Sanjo understood that this alone might not be enough. Thankfully, he was skilled in the art of persuasion and explanation, so he asked for them to stay calm and listen. That's asking a lot from Heathcliff. Their combat prowess impressed him, especially as they kept fighting, ignoring dying colleagues nearby, even laughing at this sight. Otis found this amusing, seeing any that dare impede, as someone to be promptly removed. This wasn't a compliment. Sanjo then pointed out that the head chickens, which failed to find a clear origin for them, have been occupying a restaurant's front, which are causing considerable damage. Heathcliff failed to see it as their problem. The restaurant's manager was bedridden until now. Then a fast food operative from Bratislava Chicken arrived. This was the manager of that restaurant. Samjo then gave him permission to speak of what's happening. He mentioned that their fry house opened a few months ago, just across from Yunbong's Bar and Fryers. Apparently, Bratislava Chicken had attracted all of the customers there due to generous servings of good-tasting food using poultry with a supreme pedigree. Then Yubong's owner acted strange. It was a shock to him that his customers went elsewhere, and was accused by this manager of ruining all their business. Gregor didn't see this as out of the ordinary, but in this case, it wasn't. The screams that echoed from the other side of the street suggested that this was quite serious, as head chickens attacked those living in the nest, and the owner appeared as a man with a chicken for a head, who ordered them to attack. They jumped at people, and salmonella was the least of the people's worries. Ishmael understood that he was commanding them. Gregor saw this as strange, asking how spiteful someone had to be to resort to this. The manager of Bratislava Chicken mentioned that the head chickens broke into his restaurant and destroyed things. That and the people wearing the chicken heads. It made him worried that he'd lose so much money. Samjo wasn't too concerned about this. Yi Sang understood enough about this, and Samjo mentioned that it was a tear-jerking reaction by his standards, asking of would they be willing to deal with this case. Dante noted that Yi Sang wasn't holding it together as well as he usually would do. He refused to comment. Heathcliff didn't give a as they didn't take requests from a chicken. Then Samjo offered a lifetime voucher. Basically, handle the request and they'll each have one of those. 3 orders for the rest of their lives. And this surprised the manager of Bratislava Chicken. He's never heard of. Then Samjo provided a few samples for them to try. This surprised the manager even more. Samjo distributed pieces of fried chicken that he had on him. Each had a different pedigree. Each had a unique brand of tastiness, demonstrating strengths in different cuts of meat. Seriously, K-Corp, move him to the marketing department. Don Quixote was finding it hard to choose one. Samjo told her to leave the others to anticipate for future meals. Don Quixote was interested, as well as most of the damn dozen. Heathcliff was quiet about this. He sampled the fried chicken and didn't see it as half bad. Ishmael was annoyed by this, asking if they're supposed to be looking for golden balls, not golden drumsticks. Asking since when did they... And then Heathcliff wanted the golden drumsticks, making that much clear. Yeah, he wanted to make that much clear that he wanted to die of cholesterol poisoning. Rodia's gluttonous tendencies surfaced there, asking how much it could be used, asking if takeouts counts as well. She was then reminded of her past, specifically of Ham Ham Pang Pang's freshly fried chicken. She liked that as well. Heathcliff remembered that as well. He had one whenever their syndicate earned a proper lump of dosh. Ah, so you were a syndicate thug. That explains a lot. Desperate to get some sanity back on the team, the voice of reason, Ishmael, asked... asked Faust to have them cut the already, asking if there's a company clause against fried chicken requests. Then, after a pause, Faust told him that they'd take the request. Much to Ishmael's surprise, making her question the woman of science's sanity. Gregor thinking that Ishmael was overreacting. Then again, Faust's mind was out there most of the time anyway. Heathcliff was amused that they were chummy with each other for once. Dante was questioning why Faust was taking a request over free chicken. Thankfully, Faust was taking the request for something more productive, resolving a case of the distortion phenomenon, something which Dante was unfamiliar with, and Honglu wanted to know more. It's not something that's as fully public as it's previously been made out to be. Well, certainly not in Library of Rowena and The Distortion Detective. It's unclear to most, and it's been occurring all over the city. Honglu was interested in this. Missot added his own observations, where it involves an individual morphing into a form unfit to be considered human. It has no known causes, and the appearance is all different. Well, they have different minds, that's why they're all different, Missot. Honglu asked if they were like abnormalities. Missot said no, as they don't shrink back into eggs, and it's, well, at least possible to kill them. I mean, have they forgotten about the distortion form of Chroma? He's encountered a few of them in the past, not just her. Faust then spoke of the LCD. They had consultant fixes that dealt with distortions. While small, it's large enough to show that Limbus Company is interested in the distortion phenomenon. Dante asked if the owner of Yunbongs had turned into a distortion. Faust confirmed this, as you don't just gain the ability to summon an army of raw chickens by just losing your mind. This was something of a relief to Ishmael, worrying that she might have needed to knock some sense into her. Gregor noting that it was why she was clutching her mace. Don Quixote was motivated by her desire to protect others from casualty. Rodia poked fun as the chiquita, or little girl, as she had sauce on her face, proceeding to wipe it off. Sandro took that as a yes, telling them that he'd be awaiting their contacts. Either K-Corp isn't aware of Moses the Distortion Detective, she's unavailable, well, she can't be everywhere at once, or she's with LCB and is unavailable. As she'd be perfect for dealing with this. So K-Corp are forced to make do with those 12. I mean, imagine a team of superheroes made up of a bunch of complete losers that are largely inept at what they do, and that's basically what the Damned Dozen are. Also, they've barely moved from the nest of District 14, which implies that their business in that part of the city is not finished yet. Certainly not as far as the nest is concerned. Not just their quest for the golden drumsticks. A little later, Dante asked, what are they supposed to do to resolve the distortion? They know how to kill one. They just didn't have the strength to take down their first distortion, which was Chroma. They needed that deus ex machina known as Demian to save them that time. We can thank Sinclair's connection for that. Faust saw it as simple, although she had a habit of saying it like it was simple to her. They decided to hear her out. She told them that they needed to open up the heart of the distorted, disarm the defenses, and encourage them to open up. Ryushu comically missed the point, taking it literally, asking what bone to remove first, the scapula or the sternum. Although Faust considered that an interesting proposal, Dante set them straight by telling them to visit Yubong's place to figure things out. Sinclair noting the walking poultry. Yes, walking poultry, he didn't see that as hygienic. So it's basically the poster child for any cleaning product that works. Imagine this. Are you sick of the distortion making a mess of your place? Do you need a product that's affordable yet effective? Then search no more, for Limbus wipes are coated with our patented formula that kills whatever bacteria and viruses that meets. So don't risk the lives of your visitors. Buy Limbus wipes and take the fight to the diseases that potentially lurk inside every crack. Yeah, I know. I'm at being an ad man. Anyway, Dante noted that they were like the head chickens that they previously encountered, advising them not to get too close. Sadly, Dante forgot that at least 9 of the damn dozen, 10 at most, don't give a about what they have to say. In fact, a random pigeon cooing would be a more valued presence than they would be. Rather spectacular return to form after the respected moment in and under call, which is unfortunate for Heathcliff as one of the head chickens leapt up at him, as he was asking if they have free chicken for life after they're done whacking them. Ryosho thinking that's cute and they should stab. Dante had to think of the meaning and decided that it meant slice them all bare. I think it's time for the shafted, or stop happily airing fearful terror entry dreadful. Sorry, mine aren't as good. I should probably stop doing these. Then Ishmael had something that caught her attention. Ryosho nodded. And that was when the raw chickens were leaping into the air, and before Heathcliff could take heed of Sinclair's warning, his head was devoured by one of them, becoming a host for one of the head chickens. Much to Dante's horror, Heathcliff was silent as the raw chicken that was the minion of the distortion settled on his head. Ishmael jokingly thought that he was better this way. He actually seems intelligent now. Ishmael, he has anger management issues rather than it being the case that there's a village out there that's missing its idiots. Roger was worried and told Dante to turn back the clock. And Dante was worried about what would happen to them, as they didn't want their head to turn into a chicken, while that clock was doing its thing. Ryosho said ST, which Sinclair translated for, well, as same difference. Well, FY, Ryosho. And you don't need me to translate that one, as she saw no difference between clockhead and chickenhead. There was nothing to be concerned about. Didn't stop Sinclair from being worried about Heathcliff, even though he was tormenting him for the past few months. Any time that he was sure that he could get away with it anyway. Although, it didn't stop Sinclair from asking if it was, well, he was alright in there. The head chicken on Heathcliff made some noises, and Roger asked if they could keep him as their mascot, if it never comes off. Dante fails to see her peel towards mascots. And as for the head chicken on Heathcliff, it made some noises. Don Quixote noted that it was communicating with the others. Honglu seeing him as, well, what was on him anyway, as becoming quite the chatterbox. Faust understanding this as Heathcliff's mouth being used to communicate rather than Heathcliff doing this himself. Don Quixote, she couldn't leave him like this. She apparently wanted to dress with him with, as two fixers, del decor Dante, or the fiery sunset. It would be a mockery if they did that in his current state. To avoid the crowd, they shoved him into Yubong's barn friars, following behind him. The head chicken wasn't happy. Ortiz couldn't stand this and wanted to bring him back to his senses. She grabbed the chicken with one hand and slapped it with the other, furiously, causing it pain. Misol compared these impacts to that of when she was interrogating a captive enemy. She can't see him recovering on his own, so she'd have to remove the chicken head as a whole. Roger was worried about this as she might peel his face off of that. Ortiz wasn't concerned, as if that happened, Dante could heal the damage. And Dante was annoyed with Ortiz he'd still feel the pain when that happened. Ortiz didn't pay attention to this. She was focused on removing the head chicken, much to its agony. Dante was worried that his face was actually coming off. Sadly, Heathcliff's head was largely intact. Ortiz asked if he was back with him. Them. Ortiz was asking if Heathcliff was back with them. Yeah. Getting the right pronouns and terms, it can be quite confusing, can't it? Yet another reason why I still struggle with English. Regardless, Heathcliff was distracted by the potential salmonella in his mouth, which he considered as a balmy soup. Roger asked about the serious conversation with the chickens earlier. He told them that, this is from his side of it, apparently it was involving a recipe that was lost, the cornerstone of the eatery, but once that was gone, the customers stopped coming. This was when the master acted off and infected them. Ishmael noting that he referred to the chickens as us. Heathcliff, he was confused by this, still recovering from his ordeal. Sinclair asking if that's what he intended to call them. Dante understood that the distortions occurred, that distortion, because the recipe was lost. They might need to recreate it. Faust agreed as they were getting close to the answer, even though they didn't have all the information yet. The necessary information anyway. She mentioned that the distortion occurs when the mind shatters into pieces quicker than a pot in the presence of a legendary hero Hyrule. Dante noted that she was steering away from putting it as good or evil. Largely because that, binary morality. Yes, binary morality would be overly simplistic to describe this situation. Faust then used Honglu as an example, where she said that he held a belief that he was certain about and would be an unchanging constant as he lived in the city. It could be, it could also be a hope for some other psychological sustainment that has supported his life. And this intrigued Honglu. If that support collapsed spectacularly, which breaks his ego, the mind would all come crashing down. Honglu could apparently see this happening. Heathcliff asked what could that do with him? Getting his privy purse snatched away? Honglu never had an allowance as he could spend any amount whenever he wanted. Probably has a black card. Well, had one anyway. Roger wanted to know what could break him. Honglu knew deep down inside, but he can't think of the specifics right now. Well, it's not his chapter yet, so we'll need to wait for that one. I'll see if I can think of the more existing ones. With Kali, the Red Mist! She was struggling to maintain control over the mimicry prototype. But once she had some encouraging words from Carmen, this was before she lost her mind, and also a corporeal form, she was able to not let it take her over, as in EGO corrosion. She also manifested her own EGO suit, one that was truly hers. With Philip, he wanted to, be someone that was truly respected by others, despite him having little to no traits that would result in that. Now, if it weren't for a certain psychotic clown, it's likely he would have had time to manifest his own EGO. Unfortunately, he found that clown, and that clown pushed him over the edge. He refused to hear any criticism, so he was encouraged into a form that reflected this. With Jan Vismok, his was propped up, by his belief that he could defy the prescripts of the Index, due to him being forced into being a messenger, but seeing as they saw this coming, and he saw how the prescripts were made, he saw how futile a gesture this was, and he distorted into a slave of the city's will. Yes, the inky typewriter monster. Yes, let's move on to the next one. With Zhao, she had lost most of her former comrades in her first battle against the library. She even lost her husband long before that. And when she manifested a partial EGO after her first battle, that showed that she was on the fence between manifesting a full one and distorting, Miris was supportive of her, not wanting to give up on herself, to not let their efforts be for nothing, if she can help it. This helped her to manifest successfully. With Virgilius, the Red Gaze, Carmen tried to encourage him to focus only on himself, to not think about his own actions. That he was doing this to save what he could of the children whose syndicate member parents were killed by him. Yes, she wanted him to believe that this is all to prop him up, to justify that. Unfortunately for her, he couldn't disregard that, and despite her best efforts, he manifested a hemokinetic EGO that turned the tide against Schadenfreude, which also showed Carmen's current mission in action, showing that she's not the same person that she was. Anyway, back to the story. Faust decided to sum things up. The distortion arises from deeply personal shock. The afflicted will have they'll walled off their hearts with a defense so solid you'd need a colour fixer to even make cracks into it. Although in this case, the walls need to be broken down using methods that the distorted would approve of. A similar method to what Moses, the distortion detective, what at least one that I know would consider this world's equivalent of Sherlock Holmes, which Gregor understood as the distortion wanting chicken-based cooking. Gregor offered to cook for him, having cooked a few good meals using leftovers and cans for his comrades in arms during the smoke war. Even the traumatized were moved to tears as they ate it. Ryosho was less than impressed. Gregor noting her reaction, she saw it as droll and asked what the CF, possibly cluster, knows about cooking. He'd be better off making fast food with his pincer. Honglu joyfully suggested that he opens a business. Well, if he opens a business, he'd be a boss with big, meaty claws. Gregor then translated that she was calling him a crawling furball, although he thought that Honglu's suggestion was a good one. Ryushu considered a true chef as one that followed their tongue and blade, not considering food haphazardly mashed together in a war zone as real cuisine. Roger was amused by this interaction. Sinclair noting that she's speaking with full words for once. Gregor asking if she should be giving advice, asking if she's ever cooked before. Apparently she has cooked before, on a level that he, a trifling cook, can't even imagine. Or even dare to imagine. This provokes him. Roger decided to join Ryoshu's side, due to seeing her argument as better. Gregor noting that they're splitting into teams now. Roger seeing it as fun. Gregor asking why she sided with her. Apparently it was because she felt that they were getting too close, wanting some distance, just for that day. Heathcliff decided to join Gregor's side, thinking that violence was needed for this. Gregor correcting him that physical force wasn't needed. Ortis was also not impressed by him feeding his troops canned food, seeing him as a disgrace of a soldier, and, well, it's because she preferred instant foods, joining Ryoshu's side. Gregor seeing that reference as just a preference. Ishmael seeing this as childish, as they're taking sides for such a trivial reason. Roger then asked what side she was on. Which would she trust to serve food to them, Gregor or Ryushu? Gregor telling her not to coax her. He knew her and they were close early on. Ishmael's face and posture said otherwise. She joined Ryoshu's team, much to his shock. This was due to her eating more canned foods than she'd care to remember on the ship she was on. She couldn't look Gregor in the eye. They had little rapport to begin with. Any bond between those two fell apart at that point. Don Quixote sided with Gregor. Apparently it's because of, well, Ryoshu's most awful deed when eating the skewered chicken. Ryoshu mentioned the technique to bring out the bakdachi, sorry, I butchered that pronunciation, the ultimate flavour of that. Honglu sided with Gregor as he wanted to try dishes comparable to pet food. Gregor felt awkward about this support, and I can't blame you. I mean, this is cringy even by his standards. Gregor assumed that Faust could be counted on to make the rational choice. She saw him as too risky and sided with Ryoshu. Sinclair didn't get why they were on opposing teams. Ryoshu told the chick, or possibly child heading in clear kill, to pick a side or buzz off. It was chirping hesitation that wasn't cool, kiddo. So he chose Ryoshu's side. Dante understanding that old habits die hard, as Ryoshu intimidated him far too easily. Gregor sees intimidation as cheating. Yi Sang didn't want to choose and awaited his selection. Ryushu basically rejected him based on his indecisiveness, so he joined Gregor's side. As for Miso, he didn't join Gregor's side due to this being his time of need. It was because it would make the numbers even. With the teams established, they searched for a place to cook. They found a long-neglected mess of a kitchen. The two teams cleaned up the kitchen just enough to make it usable. Dante asked if they could do this in someone else's restaurant. Ryushu saw it as rafts, so why care? Sinclair took offense to this, as she can't call it, a restaurant already fated to shut, as they're trying to help. Gregor agreeing that they were there to deal with the distortion. Then a flock of head chickens appeared and saw them as intruders. Gregor and Ryushu, much to the dismay of the head chickens, decided to put aside their differences just long enough to fight them, which was something of a relief at least to Dante. After fighting a flock of head chickens, Gregor and Ryushu went back to the kitchen, a murderous aura being part of the culinary experience. At least that was what Dante suspected. Ryushu asking Gregor what he was going to show. Was it more canned Ola? Gregor saw no dish beating the taste of survival. Then she ordered champagne hair to get her a hen. Referring to Sinclair, who complied. Gregor asking Yi Sang to open the can, as he's lacking 2 human hands to do so. He also complied. Then it started to resemble a proper kitchen. When they got to work on their dishes, there was the boiling of pots, the knives cutting, and the lighting of death sticks. That last one was being made obvious to Dante. Hearing that happening, and Gregor and Ryushu were silent at this, having been caught doing that. While in the middle of making something, only Gregor snuffed out his cigarettes. Gregor's dish was eventually ready, and Dante's opinion of this was... They asked Gregor what was it. Gregor called it a military survivalist meal. Dante asked if they really ate that in the military. Gregor then asked them, since when did they become such a delicate food critic? They're an amnesiac. Then they inspected Ryushu's dish next. It belonged in an art gallery rather than the dining area. Dante wanted to make sure that she didn't mistake their objective with assassinating the distorted restaurant owner. She said, STCU, or as Sinclair translated, shut the clock up. That's actually quite restrained by her standards. Heathcliff and Miso, during this, caught the owner of Yunbong's and put him in a seat. And this was while they were cooking. And now they started by feeding him Ryushu's cooking. He made clucking noises that they didn't understand. Faust then found him, he was difficult to understand. It would take 70 hours to decipher it based on the speech pattern and cadence. Angela could do it better, as she's not a meatbag, but she's not there, so they needed to make do with what they had. This worried Sinclair, as they can't be frying chickens all that time. Thankfully, Dante had a solution. They could hear his voice in their head. Faust theorized that this was because of the influence of the golden bars that they have collected, resonating inside Dante's mind. A staggering statement, but the owner's cries took priority. Ryushu asked what he was trying to say. Dante translated it as a funeral procession in his mouth, asking if her cooking theme was poultry apocalypse. I can imagine that the owner was saying, "What the is this dog? It's like a funeral procession in my mouth, as this dish is dead. What's your theme for this? Poultry apocalypse?" Ryoshu took this personally, threatening them that this will be the day that she'll rip that clock from its stem. Hey, Dante was just relaying the owner's review. Why slice the messenger? You don't see Virgilius doing the same to Faust when she does that for Dante. Ryoshu told them to go to hell together. Gregor pokes fun at her, believing confidence being no match for hard-boiled experience. He then fed his survivalist meal to the owner, Dante listening carefully. Gregor asking if it's starting to open up his heart. Dante told him that the owner was wondering if it was sludged up from the food waste dumpster outside. Gregor was calmer than Ryoshu was. Well, the owner probably said, "This not only looks like garbage, it tastes like garbage. Did you get this out of the dumpster outside?" I'm starting to think that the troops were either crying because he went through all that trouble of making something for them, or they were crying because they were thinking, "I'm probably going to die soon, and this is the last thing I'll ever eat." Dante told them that both dishes failed. Then the owner and his chickens appeared, and they were all too willing to express their displeasure. After they forced this expression of the owner's displeasure, along with the owner himself, a sign showing behind the owner, where it appeared showing 3/5. Heathcliff wanted to know what that meant. Yi Sang deduced that it was an indicator of how many chances they had. They wasted 2 of them. Dante told each team to prepare another dish, and so the cooking competition continued. Gregor decided to have everyone be assigned a role, even though he didn't consider it making a difference, asking Honglu if he's ever seen a kitchen before. Don Quixote trying to get his attention during this. Honglu told him that his room didn't have any kitchenettes, although he snuck into the grand dining hall on the 2nd floor a few times for snacks as a child. Don Quixote then tried to get their attention, louder this time. Then Gregor considered Yi Sang, Heathcliff questioning that, as he was fine with drinking spoiled milk. Yi Sang likely was drawn to the sensual smell, which got to his heart. Then Don Quixote made her presence so strong she might as well scream as if she's the Dovahkiin. Gregor asked if there was something wrong with her throat. She told them that she wanted to prepare a dish. Gregor didn't take this seriously, saying that this was no time for kid stuff. She complained that she's no child. Why was she denied the chef's place when Sinclair was allowed to do this on the other team? Then we see Otis shouting orders to Sinclair that the chicken was chopped too unevenly, to cut them better, to keep his back straight. Sinclair, not daring to argue with her, complied. Roger stating that it seems a bit bland, it needed more sweetness. Sinclair decided to look for the sugar. Faust advised that the heat is picked up a notch. Well, turned up a notch, yes, that makes more sense. Ryushu saw Ishmael as hopeless, that the knife grip was all wrong, who told her to stop being a backseat shepherd. Hell. Yes, backseat chefs. I'm surprised they aren't trying to kill each other. Gregor admitted that Sinclair can be trusted to take on this kind of stuff. He was from a wealthy family, so his palate would make him a good judge of this. Heathcliff was annoyed that no one was giving him any suggestions, as he can cook an egg. Oh, good for you. Some cooks can't even do that. Then he burned his hand, touching the hot frying pan, almost grilling him. He threw the pan against the wall, making it shatter. Messant estimated that the kitchen has been left unattended for at least 140 days, which is 20 weeks or approximately 4.6 months, due to the stench of mould and how dirty the kitchen was. He considered cooking outside to be more sanitary. Don Quixote wanted permission to cook, and then a head chicken leapt up, who made noises that Dante translated as, "How dare you mess up our kitchen! You'll reckon with our wrath for your foul deed!" Yes, Gregor, that's what it was saying. Gregor was struggling to keep it together, and not just to make sure that his arm didn't go crazy on them. After fighting more head chickens, Don Quixote made her dish, and Dante asked her what that food was meant to be. Don Quixote spoke of chocolates being put into the chicken, and substituting oranges for potatoes, as she disliked those. Heathcliff saw her as a right baffling bird for removing potatoes like that. You do remember who you're talking to here, Heathcliff. She has a history of causing trouble due to having a black and white mentality. A morality, even. Which has made things more difficult than they needed to be. In fact, Virgilius had to become violent to get the point across that she needs to show some restraint. Dante then asked why the chicken was brutally torn to bits. Yisang then mentioned that where he's from, it's customary to rip chickens into bite-sized pieces using one's hands. A treat to remember. I seem to recall that has happened once during an Alice Cooper concert, although in that case, Alice Cooper was given a chicken, he threw it into the audience, and they tore it to pieces alive. I suspect that in Yi Sang's case, in his hometown, the chicken was already dead when it was torn apart. Dante then asked about the lump of coal in the pan. Heathcliff found this strangely amusing that they complain, as they're mouthless, asking if they know how to eat that. Then the owner looks at the dish and instantly rejected it, sending the head chickens once again to express his displeasure. The rest of the cook-off, along with the rest of Chapter 3.5, we'll need to wait until the next part of this. Until next time. Hail the rabbit!